Oh, hi. I think, Brad, we might be on
Oh,
some kind of
hi.
live stream or something. I was just catching up on Be Socratic in your book. How are you?
I was reading the
Terrible.
parable of a house cat, zebra finch, owl, and mountain lion.
Truth be told, I opened a random page because it was all just a little prop for starting this live
Yeah.
stream. How you
Good
doing?
good to see you for the not first time today.
Fourth time today? I don't even know. Yeah. But it's always awesome to see you. And we want to talk about Give First, which is both a philosophy and now a book, which is very exciting. It's what, your 43rd book? Is that roughly?
It's my three squared book.
Ah, okay.
And
I think that,
I don't think I'm going to write three cubed worth of business books. I think I'm
okay.
probably on a three squared, and if I
Yeah.
write any more and I want to get to another squared, that would be four, but that's about it.
9 books is a lot. And it's a lot of heavy knowledge that you're dropping on the world. It's pretty cool.
Well, the books are getting lighter and lighter because I decided the world doesn't need another 225-page business book. So in addition to making it a little shorter, I also, this one did paperback because as far as I can tell, the only reason to make a hardback book is to add $4 to the cost of the book.
Yes.
I can't figure out any other reason at this point to do that.
Give First has always been kind of bendy, and so is the book, which
Yeah,
is,
it bends and evolves.
yeah. So we're going to hang out and talk about Give First, both the book and the philosophy, quite a bit. And I think, as I know you like to do, it's always fun to start with the origin story. Where the heck did this idea of Give First come from your perspective? Because I know different people will have encountered it at different times, but what's the start of it from your point of
Yeah.
view?
The first time I wrote about it was in 2012 in the book Startup Communities. And specifically in that book, I wrote a small section, a chapter, not chapter, a paragraph that said give before you get. And in that, I defined this thing. It wasn't a very tight definition, but I defined this thing that I was labeling give before you get, where you put energy into a system without defining a transaction in advance. So you put energy in the system, you don't know what you're going to get back. It's not altruism. You expect to get something back. You just don't know when or from whom or in what consideration or what form. And I wrote it in the context of startup communities, where the idea was if you want to build a healthy startup community, you need to get a critical mass of people giving first. You need to have a critical mass of people that are willing to put energy into the system, not really knowing where it's going to go, not knowing what they're going to get back. And if you can get enough of that going, you get a flywheel going, and all of a sudden some really cool things start to happen. So that was really the first time I wrote about it. A couple of months later, a book came out that really influenced me and my thinking, called Give and Take. It's by Adam Grant. I actually interviewed Adam 2 days ago for the Give First podcast, so we have an episode coming out soon. And I didn't know Adam, and he didn't know me. Uh, and I read his book, and it was pretty awesome. Like he unlike my one paragraph anecdote, he did real academic research, and he's a psychology professor at Wharton, and went really, really, really deep on this notion of who has more success: givers, people who give, or takers, people who just take. And then there's a category in the middle also, that he calls matchers, which are people that will give if they get something, right?
Hmm.
So it's I'll give you this if I get this. And his research and his conclusion, he gave not just data from research, but also qualitative examples of how givers over a long period of time have more success than takers. Uh, I didn't approach it that way in terms of my thinking. Remember, I was defining this thing as a non-transactional engagement with a system. But that was really helpful to me because it allowed me to sort of flesh out the thinking even more. Adam and I got to know each other shortly after that. So we got connected by some friends. And it turns out that a lot of the stuff that we were doing, while from somewhat different frames of references, were very similar in terms of the conclusions. And for me, I started to evolve what turned into a philosophy probably about that. Now, hashtag give before you get is not a particularly compelling hashtag. when Twitter is limited to 140 characters, which,
Or a book title for that matter.
yeah, it's kind of, I mean, whatever. And so Greg Cochran one day at Techstars a couple of years later at some event, and we were talking about this within startup communities, within Techstars, a lot of different behavior where we're trying to engage with a lot of different things without defining a transaction up front. You didn't have to have a deal before you put energy into something. And Greg started putting something on social that was, pictures of the event and hashtag give first. And all of a sudden, as a thing, the phrase give first was born.
And it was born and then amplified maybe as a concept by what you were doing in your own venture funds around Techstars. What we, I view you as the always leading example of that around our system at Techstars. And we started putting it on the wall in the kitchen, and it became a value, and it became a thing that we tried to hire people who live that way or thought that way, and maybe fire people who didn't live that way. That it's important with values, and you try to remediate it, of course, but if they can't live it, they shouldn't be there. And you talk sometimes about the difference between a value or a philosophy and sort of a religion, right? What's the differentiation in your mind between those different descriptions?
Well, I'll play around with that in the context of the evolution some because, in 2012, the definition that I came up with is not dissimilar to the definition I use, a little more precise today. And that definition, which I'll just repeat, is give first is being willing, not required, willing to put energy into a system without knowing what you're going to get back. It's not altruism. You expect to get something back. You just don't know when, from whom, over what time period, and what consideration. So as time passed, uh, that construct, which we were applying to startup communities, for me, also applied to a lot of the other ways that I lived my business life. And it really applied to a lot of things going back to the very beginning of my first company almost 40 years ago. The way I engaged with other people, the way I engaged with um, our clients. I didn't really in that first company have a lot of people around the system that I knew that were founders, but I had some mentors who were really, really impactful on me early on. People that, kind of spent a lot of time with me for no obvious reason other than they liked me and they were willing to put energy into me. Um, One of them was my uncle, my dad's younger brother, Charlie Feld, who I was very interested in computers. He was one of the people in my, as a teenager that got me involved and exposed to computers in ways I couldn't. And when I was in college at MIT, he would take me to meetings in the Boston area with Lotus, which was a huge company in Boston at that point, growing very, very quickly, or Digital Equipment Corp, or meetings with IBM that I had no business being in. And he'd have me in the meetings, and it wasn't like, hey, Brad, go sit in the corner and be quiet. He'd let me be in the meetings, and I didn't engage a lot, but I would engage a little, and I'd ask questions, and I was treated as an adult in the room, and that was really powerful to me to like have that experience of being in a context like that. One of the interesting things that evolved from that was Charlie was one of the essentially founders of what is today known as a chief information officer. I think his first title at Frito-Lay was data processing manager or something like that. But he effectively invented the handheld computer. So Frito-Lay was the first company to commercially use a handheld in the 1980s. All the truck drivers that drove Frito-Lay potato chips everywhere, that's how they kept track of their inventory in their truck and point of sale when they went into a store and did inventory that way. It was a custom device that they did with Hitachi. And like just being at the front row of that early in my career was profound. 5 years after I started my first company, Charlie started his own company. Now, the Felds were never particularly creative about naming things. So my company was named Feld Technologies and his company was named the Feld Group. But all of a sudden, I had 5 years of experience running a consulting company, and he was starting from scratch. And so, like the mentor-mentee dynamic was one where I had this early experience that evolved into peer mentorship. And Charlie and I ended up being very, very close and worked together over a number of different things, including as a VC when I was at SoftBank and subsequently Mobius Venture Capital, which was the name of same firm, but the name that we changed SoftBank to at some point, or our funds to. We invested in Charlie's company, and I was, on the board and the management committee, and worked as a partner for a number of years until that company got bought very successfully by EDS. So, like these experiences that I had were foundational in my own development. Um, we were doing that throughout Techstars in lots of different ways. Of course, at the beginning of Techstars, the whole premise of a mentor-driven accelerator was that the mentors put a lot of energy during the program into helping the founders. And it's not a one-up, one-down relationship. The mentor's not superior to the founder or something like that. It's very much the mentor is there to help the founder. And from that in 2010 came the Techstars Mentor Manifesto, David, which you wrote. And in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, we didn't really know what effective mentorship was.
We're figuring it out as we go.
Just
Yeah.
made it up. And prior to 2006, 2007, like the concept of mentorship, of course, existed, but it wasn't really articulated very well. It wasn't really part of the startup experience. It wasn't really in the dynamics of how these things were talked about. And for me, when I reflect now in 2025 back on almost 40 years of doing this kind of thing in business, whether as an entrepreneur or an investor, um, so many of the things that I've engaged in without knowing where they were going to go became the things that were really interesting. The things that I did where I defined a transaction up front. I'm willing to do this for you if you do this for me, or I'm willing to engage here if you pay me this. Uh, that's, I mean, sure, it's part of business, and it's not a dynamic that's endless either direction, whether it's a transactional or non-transactional world. But that's really led to some powerful things. So tying that to the notion of philosophy versus religion. Give First in this book is trying to evolve and like put a wrapper around this idea of give first as a business philosophy. That notion is different than a religion. In a religion, you follow a bunch of rules, and at the end of following a bunch of rules, you achieve salvation, right? And every religious type of religion has its language for that, but and you can have some religions where you follow a whole bunch of rules for a long time, and then you die and you get reincarnated and you get to follow the rules again. And one of my favorite counterlines to that is from The Big Lebowski, where the nihilists are telling Lebowski all the rules that they have to follow to be nihilists, which of course nihilist is nothing fucking matters anyway. And Lebowski just goes, man, that's so hard. Like
Hard.
religion is follow these rules. Philosophy is here are some ideas to adopt into your view of how you do things. And with Give First, it's not you must live your life, give first, and you will be saved. And it's not, you are a good person if you follow these rules. It's not that. It's ponder some different ways of existing and engaging in non-transactional ways, especially at the very inception of ideas, and incorporate that into the way you operate. And my assertion, and I think Adam Grant's assertion, would be that if you incorporate that into the way you operate, you'll have a lot more success than people who everything they do is a transaction. Everything they engage with is extraction. Everything is win-lose. You have to win. The other person has to lose. You can't both benefit. If you change the mindset, some really interesting stuff happens.
I think when I first read the first draft of Give First, which was, I don't know, must have been 3 years ago or so. because I think you sort of wrote it, got a bunch of feedback, put it on the shelf. I remember, you had sort of taken the Mentor Manifesto, which is a thing we created around the context of the accelerators at Techstars. What we saw working is basically a set of social norms or behaviors that the most powerful, effective mentors were following. And we wanted to capture that in the Mentor Manifesto, which was like 17 or whatever poorly written, sort of points about about you know how to think about it, how to behave. And then I read that, and then I sort of like, this is really great on mentorship. And then there's this idea of give first that you're trying to convey. And it sort of, I think the feedback from me and from others was, these are two great books in one book. How did you end up reconciling that? Because today the Mentor Manifesto, it's the power of mentorship, right, in the title, right, or the subtitle. And the Mentor Manifesto is closely woven in there, and they are obviously closely related in your mind and your experiences. But how did you sort of get to that from the original draft?
Yeah, so I think the right metaphor would be, think of a book where this is the book and you start reading the book. And then you turn the book upside down and backwards, and this is another book. And you can start reading the book this way, right? We've all encountered a book like that. It's kind of a cute gimmick in some bookstores and stuff. That's what I'd done. And I really hadn't put the energy into integrating these two thoughts into a coherent philosophy. Uh, and they're very interdependent, and they grew up together, right? Both the evolution of this philosophy called Give First and what effectively became effective is the right word, successful mentorship. Not mentorship is great or great mentorship or better than other mentorship, but mentorship that was actually helpful to founders at very early stages. I knew how to do that with the book. Like, I knew what that work was because I've done that with several other books, where I wrote a draft and then I just, the book it wasn't coherent in a way that was compelling. Like, it didn't keep you. I'm a huge reader. I read probably 100 books a year, and many, 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 many books have the problem of either the whole book could be 20 pages. You don't have to read the book. You read 20 pages. You read the summary. That's why summaries exist, I guess. Or it's a TED Talk. Like, it's just a lot of stuff. And it's hard to stay with it. And then there's another problem, which is you have to climb this high cliff to get going on a book. And I think we've all read that book, which is like, oh, Jesus, I'm on page 17. Like, I got to turn page 18. Like, it's just so hard to get into it. And the first version of the Startup Community Way that Ian Hathaway and I wrote in 2020 was like that. It had, like, the wall that you had to climb to get into the book was so high. And so, refactoring it, the way you do something like that is you take all the little stuff you've written, you toss it on the floor, you step back and you stare at it and you start rearranging it. And then you realize, oh shit, I got a whole bunch of stuff I got to write to fill in this and to connect that. And you know what? This isn't really good. I got to redo that. So that was one big thing I had to do when I took it off the shelf. And the other big piece of feedback I got was too much Techstars, not enough Brad. And I really didn't want to write a memoir. That was not my goal. And that's not my goal with this book as published.
That wasn't my feedback, by the way.
It wasn't yours, but I had a few other people. Yeah, you had more Techstars, 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 just like Bomber. Techstars, Techstars, Techstars.
Yes.
Give first, give first, give first. Do I do a
Love
good?
it.
Is that a good Steve Ballmer imitation?
Yeah. Try it with developers so people know.
And then we'll know.
Yeah.
The I'm thinking of Steve Ballmer because I'm listening to a really great episode on Acquired. By, if you don't know the Acquired podcast, it's Ben Gilbert and David Rosenthal, and it's outstanding. They do these long form podcasts, and this one is actually an interview with Steve Ballmer, where he's really very open and deep about things that he got right and things that he got wrong during his tenure at Microsoft, which was 35 years. And uh, but more Brad. It's like, I got to write a bunch of stuff. I got to delete some things. I got to come up with some new stories that I haven't told 37 times. And in the context of doing those two things, when I put the book on the shelf, I was also pretty tired. I've been running around traveling like crazy pre-COVID for a long time. I'd stopped traveling during COVID, obviously, and subsequently don't travel much anymore. But I was just worn out of being in public, writing every day, engaging with all kinds of stuff, whether it's these kinds of things or in-person things. And I ended up doing a thing which I now describe as hibernating, and I hibernated for 2 years. I just kind of shut it all off. I didn't make a big pronouncement. Oh, no, I'm not blogging anymore. Like none of that. I just stopped. And it was awesome. And it was actually really helpful in the context of this book because it just sat there for a while. And maybe it got a little moldy in the corners, in its virtual corners, but it let some of the things about these ideas just sort of roll around more in my mind so that when I picked it back up, I was able to look at it with some freshness and think about it in a more enduring long-term way than just, okay, now I got to redo this book and just get it out.
Yeah. There's a couple, by the way, if you have questions, I know we're streaming on a couple of different platforms. We're trying to monitor the Q&A and chat on those platforms. Please feel free to throw them in there and we'll try to address them here soon. But Brad, there's a couple things that weren't in that first draft that I think made it into the final version that I wanted to ask you about. One is I think it's being full of value added shit. What's that all about? This gives you a feeling of the approach and the style you have in the book.
Well, in between earlier this morning when I did another thing like this with you internally at Techstars, and now and this one I blogged it. So if you're interested in this, if you go to feld.com /blog, today's blog is the section from the book about this. But where this emerged, it's a story, and each of the part about the Techstars Mentor Manifesto. Actually, let me step back. The book has 4 sections. Section 1 is about Give First. Section 2 uses the Techstars Mentor Manifesto to talk through mentorship and give a lot of examples of give first behavior in the context of mentorship, but also things in mentorship, how to be an effective mentor. Section 3 talks about the challenges of give first, of which there are any philosophy has lots of issues. So I address what I've understood to be and what I've experienced as many of the issues. And the 4th section is a section I titled Entrepreneurial Sadaka. And it's not a song by Neil Sedaka, but for those of you that don't know the word Sedaka, it loosely means giving in Hebrew. And a philosopher from the 10th century, Maimonides, who was a Hebrew philosopher, came up with his 8 levels of tzedakah, or 8 levels of giving. And when I first encountered it, kind of randomly, somebody had sent something to me and said, you should read this. The first level of giving or tzedakah, is to give when somebody doesn't know they need it. And that's the highest level of his hierarchy. And my reaction, I was laying on the couch when I read it. Amy was laying on the couch reading something. I said out loud, holy shit, the first of Maimonides' tzedakah is angel investing. And Amy's response to me, as one would expect, is what the fuck are you talking about? But it was kind of this interesting thing that got me into these. So that's the structure of the book. Within that second part that uses the Techstars Mentor Manifesto, each story or each section, each one of the 18, starts with a description of what is really going on in that one line that David and John Bradford helped and I helped come up with in that initial Mentor Manifesto. I'd flesh it out into a thought rather than just a bullet point. And then I tell a story, and the stories generally come from my experience. And then I have one more thing that sort of in it that I use to wrap up the pieces, and they're not always in the same order. It's not exactly right. In this particular chapter, the Mentor Manifesto item is basically be authentic, practice what you preach. And, you kind of say today, oh, whatever, that's boring, of course. But frankly, in 2010, it was not. It was a newish idea in the context uh, of entrepreneurship and founders. This notion of authenticity was not overused. It had not gotten to the point where everybody says things like, I'm an authentic VC or whatever. And there's a lot below this, which is authenticity also has something important to do with consistency. If you have a clear value system, following that value system consistently, even when you make mistakes, owning the mistakes is important. And a lot of people who use that concept or concept of authenticity use it as an assertion about what they are rather than how they are and what their behavior is. And there's another mentor of mine, I mentioned him in the book briefly, a guy named Dov Seidman, who wrote a really important book many years ago called How, and has been a thought partner for Tom Friedman, who's a writer, public writer, writes a lot for the New York Times, who I have, if you're not a Tom Friedman fan, people will remember The World is Flat. That was one of his famous books. He's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant thinker. And somebody I don't know very well. I've met and had lunch with him once, but like read almost everything he writes. I don't agree with everything he writes, but it makes me think. And sort of this notion of internal consistency became part of it. And what it led me to in the story, which is on my blog, so I'm not going to repeat the story. I can get some traffic to my blog today, if you're so inclined. But you can read the excerpt from the book, and it's a story about a VC video that I was watching, a high-profile VC that I knew, and I was watching his video, and he was doing an interview talking about how great he was or whatever. And it just didn't ring true to me. And I knew a couple of the founders he worked with, and I knew specifically one of the instances that he was describing with this particular founder. So I reached out and it didn't sound right. I reached out to the founder and asked her about it. And, you know, her response was some version of he's full of value added shit. Basically, he's full of shit. And that turned into he's full of value added shit. For me, the generic version of that is I no longer it's no longer credible to me when somebody asserts what they are. And I like to say, whenever I hear somebody say, I'm adjective noun, or I'm an adjective noun, my response is to put the word not
Yes.
after I'm. I'm a value added VC. If anybody's a founder out there, you've probably heard that from somebody or read it somewhere. Whenever I hear that, I just put the word not after I'm. That person is not a value added VC. I'm a transparent person.
It's because they do it, not say it.
Right. And I think that's the essence of it. Give first is a good example. If somebody says, I'm giving first, they're probably not. If somebody says, I live a give first life, I'm an excellent mentor, they're probably not. Now, they could be, right?
Yeah.
But they're probably not. And so, from my frame of reference, part of this philosophy is don't assert you are, just do.
So some questions starting to come in, Brad, on the different channels. If I think a lot of people might be on LinkedIn, there's a thread with the video. Feel free to post it there, or feel free to comment or ask questions wherever you're watching, and we'll see that. But this is one about moderating this. If it's a philosophy you have, how is it that like you do a lot, right? Maybe somebody feels like they're working on their startup. How do I moderate, how much of this give first stuff I should do? Is it 10% of my time, 5% of my time? That's sort of the nature of the question.
Yeah, it's one that I've evolved my thinking on over time too. I used to say, hey, look, if Google can have 20% time and anybody can spend 20% of their time working on whatever they want, you can figure out how to weave this kind of philosophy and effort into your work. Again, non-transactional activity, 20% of your time if you're a busy founder and that's what you're focused on. Of course, at some point, I understood that the Google 20% time was bullshit, and for a lot of people, and it was you guys could spend 20% of your time on whatever you wanted as long as you worked on it on Saturday. I worked on it on Sunday, right? Like it's like, and now there's, there's an even different problem, which is, I think been in the press plenty and lots of people have talked about it, which is, people at Google aren't even really working that hard, not across Google. And I know that's changed in the general, I'm picking on Google. I could pick on anybody else, but this idea of, actually, the level of engagement that people really have in their company. The serious comment, not to play around with that one though, is the answer is there's no amount that you need to, and it's a philosophy, again, not a requirement. And so the idea is to incorporate these ideas into what you're doing And I've heard over and over again from busy founders some version of, I don't have anything to contribute. I'm not experienced enough. I don't have any financial resources. I don't know what anybody's going to get out of me. I can't mentor. I don't know what that means. I don't have anything to teach. And I have a long list of counterexamples to that, which I think you can summarize as I believe everyone at any point in their time, life on this planet um, has something that others can learn from. And the opportunity, I almost said challenge, but I think it's opportunity. The opportunity is to be comfortable with that, especially when you're busy or early on your journey. The trick is not to say, okay, I'm going to go, get a job doing a thing, giving first, where there is no job to do that. So I'll give an example. There's a category of person in startup communities, which I now call, Ian and I labeled instigator. But instigator is someone who's not a founder, but plays a leadership role in a startup community. So you have instigators, founders, they're the leaders. And then all the organizations that participate are feeders. The instigators tend to break into one of two categories. Category one is they work for an organization, one of these feeders, but their job is to engage and help startups in some ways. And of course, if you've ever worked for or with Microsoft or AWS or Google or any other big tech companies, or even small ones, like, for example, SendGrid, I think Paul Ford's job for a long time at SendGrid was just help startups, make progress. And of course, the second order effect was that a lot of them used SendGrid for free at the very beginning of their journey, but it wasn't, hi, I'm Paul, use SendGrid. It was, hi, I'm Paul. What can I do to be helpful to you with your business? So those people have full-time jobs in which woven into their full-time job is something that's got those characteristics. But then you have people that don't have that job and say, oh, I love doing that. I'm going to do that. Well, that's cool. If you spend 100% of your time on that and you're not independently wealthy, at some point you got to eat. You need you need a job, you need some money. And so if you move the index to 100%, it's not going to be a very satisfying experience. And you'll end up on the other side of the curve, which is this give first stuff is bullshit. I'm spending all my time giving first and I'm not getting anything back.
No.
Well, it's not a job. And by the way, if you need some money, you probably need a job. And if this is a philosophy that you want and you agree with and you buy into, incorporate some of it into your work or spend some of your non-work time of which you have, incorporating that into how you're doing things. But do it at what level you can, but all the time, continually, so that it compounds. It's just like, compounding value, which I think everybody in the world of entrepreneurship now understands. When I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, they had a lot of financial literacy around compound interest and how that worked. And frankly, we probably need some financial literacy in the world again with that kind of thing. But that's how you learn how to save. If you do it continually, it compounds. And this is another one of those things. If you do it continually, it compounds.
A question that I pull up that's related is, do you view the books that you're creating as a form of give first? Because it's not really your job, but yet, you've written 9 books, three times three. Yeah, that's right, 9. Is that a way that you like to give first? Do you equate those things or not really?
Yeah, there's a part of it that's that. So it's useful to sort of be precise about the books. I write to figure out ideas. I My brain, there's lots of different ways people process information and think. I have what's called a synthesizer brain. I process by reading and writing. I don't process by listening and talking. I get inputs by listening and talking, but I don't process the ideas until I write or read. I don't take notes, so I don't have to write down them because the stuff's in my brain, but then I have to kind of take it out and organize it that way. So in one sense, writing is a very selfish act for me because the process of writing is how I actually understand concepts that I want to develop and explore. I think the same is true of reading. I love to read, but it's a very selfish act. I'm reading because it's how I expose myself to new ideas and learn. Not everybody, I mean, some people are very auditory and they have to hear it instead of read it. So everybody has a way of thinking, but I'm using this as the starting point for it. So I started writing publicly in around 2004 when I started my blog, and I really played follow the leader with Fred Wilson. So Fred had started blogging, and very shortly after he started blogging, I started blogging. And I was kind of interested in the technology around content generation and RSS and a bunch of other things. And I figured, the way I learn also is by doing. So I just got an email from somebody, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I heard you're using granola. I have a company that's doing something way better than granola." And emails went back and forth. And the person said, "Here's my Calendly. Let's get on a call and let me talk you through it." And I said, "Nah, I just want to download the thing and fuck around with it." Like that's how I learn. I don't learn by like listening to you for 30 minutes. I learn by trying it and understanding what it does. So that's writing for me. The first book was the book you and I did, Do More Faster. And neither of us knew how to write a book at that point, although I was pretty comfortable writing. Um, the second book I wrote was with Jason Mendelson. It was called Venture Deals. We're now in the fourth edition of that. And that book has really had enduring value. And the goal with that book came from a series of blog posts that Jason and I had worked on together that were on Feld.com dating back to 2005, where we were really frustrated with the state of understanding of a venture capital term sheet and doing a venture capital deal at that point. The information asymmetry was really severe. Entrepreneurs and founders didn't really understand what the terms were, what the issues were. VCs, of course, did. The lawyers were not terribly helpful. They were also expensive in the context of that. And we just were motivated to try to deconstruct it and make it understandable. And that book for me was really the book I learned how to write books with. And links to what, David, your description is I got an enormous amount of emotional satisfaction from having done this thing, which was a series of blog posts. We didn't have to put the effort into a book, but the book was a much better version than a series of blog posts. And it forced us to really think through a bunch of stuff and do a really good job, at least from our frame of reference. Fourth edition, we fixed a bunch of things we got wrong and didn't explain very well, in a way that was really durable and lasting. So that's been really satisfying to me. I think that's those two things are the most valuable parts of writing the books for me. There's a lot of second order effects. It's very amusing, the dynamics around economics of books. There are a lot of people who write books to make money for some reason. Most people don't make much money or any money from actually the writing of the books. There are ways to do that. You can make some money from that, but it's not meaningful. And if you're somebody like me that doesn't care that much about that part of it, um, uh, the traveling around that I'm going to be doing for the next 3 months, I think are many multiples of dollars of the revenue I will get from the sale of the books, even if, I sell many, many, many of these books. Um, uh, but it's not a financial satisfaction. It's not a financial experience. It's an emotional experience.
Yep.
And for me, in this particular context, writing books and having them have real value in the startup world, impact the way people talk and think in the entrepreneurial ecosystem writ large, help go down paths that I really care about, like democratizing entrepreneurship globally. Anybody anywhere in the world should be able to start a company and build a really meaningful company. It's another vehicle that helps me generate and get the ideas that I believe are effective out into the world. And to the extent they help others, that's really satisfying.
So, sort of tying into the religion, versus philosophy thing, Elijah was commenting, some people may not have like the generosity gene that Jack Welch talked about. And it's inauthentic if maybe they don't. Maybe this works for you, Brad, because you are just being your authentic self. I guess the question that I'll add to it, which was more just a comment, from Elijah is does this work for everyone? Do you recommend that everyone try to adopt this give first philosophy, or is it really just for people that have that generosity gene?
Well, two things. One is it's not generosity. I very explicitly use the word altruism rather than charity or philosophy. This give first is a behavior that is different in that you're willing to do something non-transactionally on the front end. I don't have to define at the beginning what I'm going to get, but you do expect to get something. You might not get it directly from the person you're doing something with. You might not get it in financial consideration. It might be indirect. It might be a long time from now. It might be reputational. It might be something completely random that you had no idea and didn't anticipate at all ever experiencing. I don't think that's generosity. I think that's, again, philosophy.
Yeah.
And in the context of philosophy, there are lots of different philosophies. I'll use my own personal philosophy, which I will write about soon. It's on my list of I need to go write this blog post, and I don't get to it. I've adopted the philosophy of absurdism. For a long time, if you said, Brad, what's your personal philosophy? I would have said it's existentialism. My religion is I'm Jewish, comma, atheist, with, comma, bolder, Buddhist, earthy, crunchy values. Pretty fair? David's smiling, sounds like me. But my philosophy is existentialism. I believe that we create our own meaning. I believe we get one shot at this thing called life. I believe it's up to us, regardless of what resources or experience we have, to create the meaning that is this experience. There's lots of stuff we could go further on. There's a lot of problems with existentialism and lots of things that in my own view of the world I've changed. I have an inner voice. It's a dark one. It's in the corner. I try to keep him in the corner of my brain. Every now and then he shows up, and he whispers. And it's most definitely a he with a very deep voice. And he says, "Hey, Brad, just remember, nothing really matters." And that's very nihilist, right? Nothing matters. Um, and I started recently referring to myself as an existential nihilist. You create your own meaning, but none of it matters. I don't have kids. I don't believe in legacy. I want to leave it all in the field while I'm alive. I don't know if I'm going to live 2 more days or 30 more years. This is it. This is the experience that I believe I get, and I want to do as much as I can that's meaningful in the construct that I'm creating now. My first business partner, who has semi-retired, but he studies philosophy and has been for the last 10 years, Dave Joke, on a call that we were on where I made just a sarcastic crack about being an existential nihilist because I was having a bad day or something. He said to me very pedantically, Brad, you know there's no such thing as an existential nihilist. And I let it go. And afterwards, I'm like, there's this thing called Google. I'm going to go look up existential nihilist. It turns out there is a thing called an existential nihilist.
So
And
Google thinks, yeah.
yeah, I mean, maybe Google made it up, right? Or the AIs made it up. But it led me to a page on Wikipedia called Absurdism, which actually does exactly describe what I've been saying. And absurdism is very simple. It's we live in an irrational and uncaring universe in which we create our own meaning that the universe doesn't care about. And Amy and I had the opportunity recently. We spent time in Tucson in the winters. They've got 4 magnificent observatories there because of the geography and how high elevation and a bunch of other reasons. And if you've never looked at Saturn through mirrors, what I mean by that is a telescope, but not electronically, not a photo of Saturn, a digital image of Saturn, like at 11 o'clock at night when it's cold, staring with your eye against a thing and looking at Saturn this big and thinking about what's between you and that thing, and you're looking at it through mirrors, it's easy to say the trees don't care about us, the rocks don't care about us. They've been living here a long time. It's really powerful.
It
And
is.
when I cycle all the way back with that, the notion of the meaning we create, if you don't think you're generous, that's cool. You don't have to be generous. It's fine. Um, you don't have, my message would be, if you want to have success, again, you get to define what that means for you. You don't have to start every engagement by figuring out what you're going to get out of it in advance.
It's you remind me, people always ask me what book has impacted me the most in my life, and I always say Pale Blue Dot. Uh, then of course Year Nine immediately follow that. But that's the photo of, the Earth in a
Yeah.
in a array of light taken from just behind the rings of Saturn, not even that far away, comparatively, being a speck of dust floating around there. So totally get it.
And I just want to stay on one last point because I am talking, and we talked about it. I love the way you wove it in earlier. Everything I just said in the last 5 or 6 minutes is philosophy, not religion.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about salvation. I'm not telling you how you have to be. I'm not suggesting that this is the only way. I'm just saying this is a way to think about this existence thing we have. By the way, if you think it's stupid and doesn't appeal to you, no problem. Totally cool.
You'll still learn something. There's another question here. What advice would you give to a founder trying to teach their team give first? I feel like that's a layup question, but we got it, so I'm tossing it out.
Right. I appreciate it. Number one, don't tell your team that your new way of being is to give first. Just do it. Maybe hand out copies of the book so that my publisher is happy and makes a little more money. But in the context of, here's some ideas that can help you. By the way, if this is appealing and useful to you in the context of your business, send me an email, brad@feld.com. Happy to talk about doing a 30 or 60-minute thing with your leadership team and just, talking about it. But it's doing, it's incorporating it into whatever your values are and then executing it. Really powerful thing about being a founder, this is what I discovered when I was founder of my first company, is you get to create your own cultural norms. And that's a precise word I use. I didn't say culture. I say cultural norms. Culture is a bad word. It is an unhelpful word in the context of business because it's too squishy. It has implications that allow people to be really sloppy in their thinking, in my mind. I like to define cultural norms. What are the, call them values if you want, what are the norms that we're going to subscribe to as a business? And when you're a founder with your co-founders, you get to define those. I also despise the phrase culture fit. When
Mhm.
you're hiring people, you're not hiring for culture fit, you're hiring for culture add. You have your norms. This is our value system. This is how we live. This is what we're doing. If you don't like these, no problem. Find another job. Go work for a different company. If you like these norms and you can extend them and help us think about them differently and add to them based on your experiences, based on your points of view, that's great. That's special. That's powerful. And so, sort of in the context of uh, how you do that, how you do this as a leader, is be clear on what your cultural norms are and start incorporating aspects of this philosophy into them. And, in this book, there's 18 hints, which is the Techstars Mentor Manifesto. Don't take all 18 of them. If you give people 18, say, start acting like this, it'd be terrible. But if you pick one or two and you think, and you make it your own, this is interesting. Here's how I want to integrate this into my cultural norms. And then you have to live that. You have to do it over and over and again. And when you screw it up, which by the way, I do all the time, I screw up my cultural norms regularly. You have to acknowledge it. You have to own it. You have to apologize for it. You can't deflect it. You can't avoid it. When somebody calls you out about it, yep, you're right. I screwed that up. Okay, let's step back and figure out why I screwed that up. And let me try to get better at that.
One more question here I want to get to. I think we have time. What is your advice for those who are seeking help? Any general tips on framing the ask from a new connection?
Yes. Number one, don't ask somebody to be your mentor. That's not an effective way to develop the relationship. It happens a lot. It became a thing that everybody's like, okay, I need mentors. Let me go find mentors. Hey, will you be a mentor? What you want to do is you want to figure out how to get the attention of the person who you want to engage with and get them to engage with you via that activity. The best way to get someone's attention if they're busy is to spend a little bit of time thinking about what they care about and figuring out what small thing you can do that positively impacts something they care about. This is not pandering to them. This is not saying, oh, you're so smart, or I like what you're doing, or here's a thumbs up on all your content, or something like that. It's understanding what they care about in the world. And when you see them doing something that you can intersect and add to that thing they're doing, you just do it. You don't then send them a note and say, please give me credit. But then you do it again. And what happens is if you do it a few times, I'll give a very tangible example of one that I used to recommend to people. You do it a couple of times, and the person will start to get to know you and start to engage with you. Here's a great example from a long time ago that led to extremely enduring friendships. Fred Wilson's blogging, I'm blogging. We have on our blogs comments. At the time, it used to be cool to get comments. Like I get a couple of comments on my blog post and be like, oh, people are actually reading this thing. Cool. And then, I'd reply to the comments and you sort of get engaged with the people. And at about the same time, both Fred and I start getting comments from this guy named Howard Lindzen. The fuck is Howard Lindzen? Never heard of him before. And his comments are kind of funny. Some of
Weirdo.
them are clever. He challenges some of the stuff we write. His grammar's not terribly good, but he's after it. And it's not every single time we write something. It's whenever we write something that he then has something to say about. And all of a sudden, Fred and I kind of at some point, like, we both notice it. We were commenting on each other's blogs, and sometimes we reference back and forth. And we both get an email from Howard. And I don't remember if it was he sent it to both of us at the same time or separate emails, but it was basically some version of, hey, if you're ever in Phoenix, where I live, I'd love to see you guys. I come to New York, if I can get together with you, Fred, I'd love to, da 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 da. And kind of all of a sudden it starts to develop a little bit of an email relationship that then turns into, I was in Phoenix, he and I went out to lunch. He was in New York, Fred and him, I'm sure, went for a walk or something. And then Howard decides he's going to start a company because he's now sort of into tech. And he starts a company called StockTwits. And he sends us both notes. And we're both like, yeah, cool. We'll toss a little money in. And that was 2006, maybe. That ended up being a modest success. It wasn't a huge success, modest success. But the friendship developed. And the engagement around things grew. And he learned a lot from us. And I learned a lot from Howard because he knew a bunch of stuff about finance that I knew nothing about because of his previous life. And all of a sudden, he decides to raise a little fund to make some investments in other and on and on. You get where it goes, right? But it's that doing, but not in a sort of uh, random way, in a way that engages with something somebody's already involved in or already interested in.
And your story echoes to me, right? Because somehow I get connected to Howard and I end up investing in his funds and he's invested in our funds and we still, make fun of each other all the time. And it's from doing stuff together and it's little things. So, Brad, thanks for writing the book. Thanks for living the book and the philosophy,
And I do
uh,
that too.
and for all the books you've written. I know it's a labor of love, so to speak. It's so helpful to so many
No,
people,
it's
and
I go back to the person about the generosity gene. It's selfish. It's how I learn.
yeah,
Nobody
but
reads this. If nobody ever reads this book, I
still
still
learn. But you know what? It's affecting a lot more people, and that's really
yeah. Well,
good.
that makes me very happy.
Yeah. So thanks for taking the time today to chat and hang out with us. And we know we'll see you soon. And I'm sure people will reach out and say hi if they want to. So thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.